Citation to accompany the award of the Congressional Medal of Honor presented to United States Army Sergeant First Class Paul R. Smith. Sergeant First Class Paul R. Smith distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty in action with an armed enemy near Baghdad International Airport, Baghdad, Iraq, on 4 April 2003. On that day, Sergeant First Class Smith was engaged in the construction of a prisoner of war holding area when his task force was violently attacked by a company-sized enemy force. Realizing the vulnerability of over 100 fellow soldiers, Sergeant First Class Smith quickly organized a hasty defense consisting of 2 platoons of soldiers, 1 Bradley fighting vehicle, and 3 armored personnel carriers. As the fight developed, Sergeant First Class Smith braved hostile enemy fire to personally engage the enemy with hand grenades and anti-tank weapons and organize the evacuation of 3 wounded soldiers from an armored personnel carrier struck by a rocket-propelled grenade and a 60-millimeter mortar round. Fearing the enemy would overrun their defenses, Sergeant First Class Smith moved under withering enemy fire to man a .50 caliber machine gun mounted on a damaged armored personnel carrier. In total disregard for his own life, he maintained his exposed position in order to engage the attacking enemy force. During this action, he was mortally wounded. His courageous actions helped defeat the enemy attack and resulted in as many as 50 enemy soldiers killed, while allowing the safe withdrawal of numerous wounded soldiers. Sergeant First Class Smith's extraordinary heroism and uncommon valor are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the 3rd Infantry Division Rock of the Marne, and the United States Army. Sergeant First Class Smith was 33 years old when he was killed in action. He was a native of Tampa, Florida. He is survived by his wife and their 2 children. He was highly regarded by his troops and superiors alike. His sister summed up his personal character in a speech after his death in which she said this: "Paul Ray had an incredible love for the troops under his command. One Christmas, the wife of a soldier in Paul Ray's platoon had just had surgery, and the soldier and his wife were unable to provide Christmas for their family. So Paul Ray collected food from the company Christmas party, and he and his wife bought presents for the children, and they took them to the soldier's home. Paul Ray's family never heard of this until recounted to them by friends after his death." She also says another very descriptive event that showed Paul Ray's concern for his men involves another soldier whose little baby daughter was unexpectedly admitted to the hospital with a serious illness. Paul Ray would drive an hour out of town every night to give his support to this soldier and his wife. In the last letter that Paul Ray wrote to his parents from Iraq, he told them, now that he was a father himself, he realized just how much they had sacrificed to make his life a good life, and he thanked them for that special effort. He spoke of being prepared to give. He said, "All that I am to ensure that all my boys make it home." In that same manner, he told our parents how proud he was of the privilege to be given 25 of the finest Americans we call soldiers to lead into war. And he recognized their fears and his responsibilities for their welfare. Sergeant First Class Paul R. Smith was laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Citation to accompany the award of the Congressional Medal of Honor presented to United States Navy Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, as the leader of a special reconnaissance element with Naval Special Warfare Task Unit Afghanistan on 27 and 28 June 2005. While leading a mission to locate a high-level anti-coalition militia leader, Lieutenant Murphy demonstrated extraordinary heroism in the face of grave danger in the vicinity of Azdabad, Konar Province, Afghanistan. On 28 June 2005, operating in an extremely rugged enemy-controlled area, Lieutenant Murphy's team was discovered by anti-coalition militia sympathizers who revealed their position to Taliban fighters. As a result, between 30 and 40 enemy fighters besieged his 4-member SEAL team. Demonstrating exceptional resolve, Lieutenant Murphy valiantly led his men in engaging the large enemy force. The ensuing fierce firefight resulted in numerous enemy casualties, as well as the wounding of all 4 members of the team. Ignoring his own wounds and demonstrating exceptional composure, Lieutenant Murphy continued to lead and encourage his men. When the primary communicator fell mortally wounded, Lieutenant Murphy repeatedly attempted to call for assistance for his beleaguered teammates. Realizing the impossibility of communicating in the extreme terrain and in the face of almost certain death, he fought his way into open terrain to gain a better position to transmit a call. This deliberate, heroic act deprived him of cover, exposing him to direct enemy fire. Finally achieving contact with his headquarters, Lieutenant Murphy maintained his exposed position while he provided his location and requested immediate support for his team. In his final act of bravery, he continued to engage the enemy until he was mortally wounded, gallantly giving his life for his country and for the cause of freedom. By his selfless leadership, courageous actions, and extraordinary devotion to duty, Lieutenant Murphy reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Naval Service. Lieutenant Murphy was 29 years old when he was killed in action. A native of Patchogue, New York, he is survived by his father, his mother, and his brother. He attended Penn State University, where he was an exceptional all-round athlete and student, excelling in ice hockey and graduating with honors. Following graduation, he was accepted to several law schools, but instead, he changed course and decided to attend SEAL mentoring sessions at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point, Long Island, with his sights on becoming a United States Navy SEAL. Lieutenant Murphy accepted an appointment to the Navy's Officer Candidate School at Pensacola, Florida, in September of 2000. He was commissioned as an ensign in the Navy on 13 December 2000 and began basic underwater demolition SEAL or BUDS training in Coronado, California. Upon graduation from BUDS, he attended the Army Jump School, the SEAL Qualification Training, and SEAL Delivery Vehicle or SDV School. Lieutenant Murphy earned his SEAL Trident in July of 2002. He was laid to rest at Calverton National Cemetery, just 20 miles from his hometown. Citation: to accompany the award of the Air Force Cross presented to United States Air Force Senior Airman Jason D. Cunningham. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Title 10, Section 8742 of the United States Code, awards the Air Force Cross to Senior Airman Jason D. Cunningham for extraordinary heroism in military operations against an opposing armed force while serving as pararescueman near the village of Marzak in the Paktia province of Afghanistan on 4 March 2002. On that proud day, Airman Cunningham was the primary Air Force combat search and rescue medic assigned to a quick reaction force tasked to recover 2 American servicemen evading capture in austere terrain occupied by masked Al-Qaeda and Taliban forces. Shortly before landing, his MH-47E helicopter received accurate rocket-propelled grenade and small arms fire, severely disabling the aircraft and causing it to crash land. The assault force formed a hasty defense and immediately suffered 3 fatalities and 5 critical casualties. Despite effective enemy fire and at great risk to his own life, Airman Cunningham remained in the burning fuselage of the aircraft in order to treat the wounded. As he moved his patients to a more secure location, mortar rounds began to impact within 50 feet of his position. Disregarding this extreme danger, he continued the movement and exposed himself to enemy fire on 7 separate occasions. When the second casualty collection point was also compromised, in a display of uncommon valor and gallantry, Airman Cunningham braved an intense small arms and rocket-propelled grenade attack while repositioning the critically wounded to a 3rd collection point. Even after he was mortally wounded and quickly deteriorating, he continued to direct patient movement and transferred care to another medic, In the end, his distinct efforts led to the successful delivery of 10 gravely wounded Americans to life-saving medical treatment. Through his extraordinary heroism, superb airmanship, aggressiveness in the face of the enemy, and in dedication of his service to his country, Senior Airman Cunningham reflected the highest credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. Senior Airman Cunningham was just 26 when he was killed in action. He's a native of Carlsbad, New Mexico. He's survived by his wife and their 2 children. Originally enlisted in the United States Navy with the dream of becoming a Navy SEAL, he decided to train to become a United States Air Force pararescueman, better known as parajumpers or PJs. And his rationale? Well, he reasoned that while other special operators search and destroy, PJs search and save. Their motto, that others may live. Senior Airman Jason D. Cunningham was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery. Citation: to accompany the award of the Navy Cross presented to United States Marine Sergeant Rafael Peralta. The President of the United States of America takes pride in presenting the Navy Cross to Sergeant Rafael Peralta, United States Marine Corps, for extraordinary heroism while serving as platoon guide with 1st Platoon, Company A, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, Regimental Combat Team 7, 1st Marine Division, in action against anti-coalition forces in support of Operation Al-Fajr in Fallujah, Iraq on 15 November 2004. Clearing scores of houses in the previous 3 days, Sergeant Peralta asked to join an understrength squad and volunteered to stand post the night of 14th November, allowing fellow Marines more time to rest. The following morning, during search and attack operations, while clearing the 7th house of the day, the point man opened a door to a back room and immediately came under intense, close-range, automatic weapons fire from multiple insurgents. The squad returned fire, wounding one of the insurgents. While attempting to maneuver out of the line of fire, Sergeant Peralta was shot and fell mortally wounded. After the initial exchange of gunfire, the insurgents broke contact, throwing a fragmentation grenade as they fled the building. The grenade came to rest near Sergeant Peralta's head. Without hesitation and with a complete disregard for his own personal safety, Sergeant Peralta reached out and pulled the grenade to his body, absorbing the blunt of the blast and shielding fellow Marines only feet away. Sergeant Peralta succumbed to his wounds. By his undaunted courage, intrepid fighting spirit, and unwavering devotion to duty, Sergeant Peralta reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. Sergeant Peralta was 25 years old when he was killed in action. He was a native of Mexico City, Mexico. He is survived by his mother and brother, and he joined the United States Marine Corps when he received his green card in 2000 and became an American citizen while serving in the Corps. Sergeant Rafael Peralta was laid to rest in Rosencrantz National Cemetery near San Diego, California. The 1800s English author Aubrey Pine once wrote that what we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains and is immortal. Memorial Day in these great United States is always interesting to me. There's this juxtaposition between those that have been intimately affected by the loss of a loved one in combat and those that consider Memorial Day to be about retail sales, cookouts, and trips to the beach. I'm not here to judge anybody. These are all great things, but maybe a bit out of context. Ironically, Memorial Day kicks off what is known to us in the military as the 101 critical days of summer. That's the period between 28 May and the Labor Day weekend in September. And ironically, this is the most dangerous stretch of time in the calendar year for the military because of the increase in fatalities that comes with summertime activities. Anyway, my point is that I fear that as a nation we become more and more complacent over the sacrifices that have been made to secure our God-given freedoms that we all enjoy. But I digress. These four patriots, heroes we all can agree on, one from each branch of the armed services, gave their last full measure of devotion to secure freedom not only for our nation, but for a people in a faraway land that were living under the boot of tyranny. But they are not alone. To secure our God-given rights, it cost the lives of 25,300 patriots during the American Revolution. To abolish the scourge of slavery, it cost the lives of 363,000 Union soldiers during the Civil War. To serve our fellow man overseas, it cost the United States 117,000 of our sons and daughters in the war to end all wars. To avenge our sailors at Pearl Harbor and to save the world from the evil Axis, it cost us another 408,300. To save a peninsula, the toll was 54,200 killed in action during the Forgotten War, otherwise known as the Korean War. To stop the spread of communist aggression in the jungles of Vietnam, we lost 58,200 Americans. To avenge our fellow Americans lost in the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and in the field over Shanksville, we've lost over 7,000 American sons and daughters in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, this only represents a fraction of the 63 conflicts that the fighting men and women of the United States of America have engaged in from the American Revolution until today. All told, over 1 million great Americans have died on the field of battle. That there are patriots that are willing to stand in the gap is a testimony to the courage of a nation's sons and daughters who are willing to sacrifice their lives because they understand that we are always a generation away from tyranny. These sacrifices have been demonstrated time and time again, with the burden of preserving this precious freedom taken on by less than 1% of the American populace. There has to be an understanding in this nation, greater in numbers than with those that serve, that freedom is not free. Sacrifice. During his 1982 Memorial Day speech, President Ronald Reagan spoke these words. In America's cities and towns today, flags will be placed on graves and cemeteries. Public officials will speak of the sacrifice and the valor of those whose memory we honor. In 1863, when he dedicated a small cemetery in Pennsylvania, marking a terrible collision between the armies of North and South, Abraham Lincoln noted the swift obscurity of such speeches. Well, we know now that Lincoln was wrong about that particular occasion. His remarks commemorating those who gave their last full measure of devotion were long remembered. But since that moment at Gettysburg, few other such addresses have become part of our national heritage. Not because of the inadequacy of the speakers, but because of the inadequacy of the words. President Reagan goes on to say, I have no illusions about what little I can add now to the silent testimony of those who gave their lives willingly for their country. Words are even more feeble on this Memorial Day, for the sight before us is that of a strong and good nation that stands in silence and remembers those who were loved and who, in return, loved their countrymen enough to die for them. Yet we must try to honor them, not for their sakes alone, but for our own. And if words cannot repay the debt we owe these men, surely with our actions we must strive to keep faith with them and with the vision that led them to battle and to final sacrifice. Our first obligation to them and ourselves is plain enough. The United States and the freedom for which it stands, the freedom for which they died, must endure and prosper. Their lives remind us that freedom is not bought cheaply. It has a cost. It imposes a burden, and just as they whom we commemorate are willing to sacrifice, so too must we, in a less final, less heroic way, be willing to give of ourselves. The willingness of some to give their lives so that others might live never fails to evoke in us a sense of wonder and mystery. One gets that feeling here on this hallowed ground. And I have known that same poignant feeling as I looked out across the rows of white crosses and stars of David in Europe, in the Philippines, and in the military cemeteries here in our own land. Each one marks the resting place of an American hero. And in my lifetime, heroes of World War I, the Doughboys, the GIs of World War II, or Korea, or Vietnam. They span several generations of young Americans, all different and yet all alike, like the markers above their resting places, all alike in a truly meaningful way. As we honor their memory today, let us pledge that their lives, their sacrifices, their valor shall be justified and remembered for as long as God gives life to this nation. And let us also pledge to do our utmost to carry out what must have been their wish, that no other generation of young men and women will ever have to share their experiences and repeat their sacrifice. Earlier today, with the music that we have heard and that of our national anthem, I can't claim to know the words of all the national anthems in the world, but I don't know of any other that ends with a question and a challenge as ours does. Does that flag still wave? Excuse me. Over the land of the free and the home of the brave. This is what we must all ask. Now, what really strikes me about President Reagan's words is the following excerpt from this speech. Quote, "The willingness of some to give their lives so that others might live never fails to evoke in us a sense of wonder and mystery. As with many others, Sergeant First Class Smith, Lieutenant Murphy, Senior Airman Cunningham, and Sergeant Peralta's motivations for serving this great nation and our way of life were all different. I don't assume to know their hearts, but if you noticed in each of their citations, their final motivating act of courage was born out of their love for their brothers and sisters in arms. Each one of them died so that others may live, as the Air Force PJ motto highlights. Sacrifice. Sacrifice. Sacrifice as a result of love. What kind of love must you have to stand alone against an entire company of enemy combatants in order to buy enough time for your fellow soldiers to safely egress a hostile area? Sacrifice. What kind of love must you have to expose yourself to a fusillade of machine gun fire and rocket-propelled grenades in order to call in a rescue team for your SEALs? Sacrifice. What kind of love must you have to continue to aid your fellow servicemen, even after the bullet that tore into you sealed your fate? Sacrifice. What kind of love must you have to selflessly cradle a grenade to your body without hesitation? The Bible calls it agape love. Do you have that love inside of you? This world is a crazy place, brothers and sisters, and we're going to need it in spades if we call ourselves the children of the Most High. Jesus Christ driven and centered love. This kind of love takes sacrifice. A couple of things I want to run by you. Some tough but maybe simple questions actually. And I know this is all elementary and it's fundamental. But I ask you to examine your hearts, my brothers and sisters. How is your relationship with Jesus Christ? How do you demonstrate your devotion to Him and to each other as the body of Christ? If you say you love the Lord, do you mean it by your actions? Or are you pharisaical in your approach to your faith? Jesus has told us to deny ourselves and take up our cross and follow Him. And He also tells us that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord our God with all our heart and soul and mind. Of course, he also instructs us that the greatest commandment is to love our neighbor as ourself. What does he mean, love ourself? Is that to be conceited, self-centered? Negative. This is the measure for you to love others by what you wish for yourself. But I want you to hear what I say about this now, loved ones. Your ability to show that love must come with sacrifice. Sacrifice is the logical path to displaying, demonstrating, unvarnished, unapologetic, unwavering love. Love is what drove each of these warriors I memorialized today. Each gave their last full measure of devotion because they loved their fellow brothers in arms. They loved this great nation. And as you demonstrate love for Jesus Christ, you do that through sacrifice. It's true. I'm not making this up. It's all written in here. John tells us, Jesus said in chapter 15, verse 13, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Does Jesus Christ want us to die for another? I stand before you, brothers and sisters, and readily admit that I am not Jesus Christ. But I would like to think that in a blink of an eye, when it matters, that it would be the logical conclusion of Jesus Christ in me. Is that true for you? Or does lay down your life for another mean a little bit more? Does it mean that you give yourself in an unselfish way? Be it time, money, fellowship, or a helping hand? What are the day-to-day grenades that you would be willing to throw yourself on for another? Would you be willing to stand in a hail of life's bullets for your brothers or sisters? Would you sacrifice a want in your life for a need of another? Galatians tells us, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. What about your time? This is one of our most precious resources as human beings. Our time on this earth is far from infinite. The Bible tells us that our life is vapor that appears for a little while and then disappears. To that, do you sacrifice your time to prosper God's church on this earth? Now, I'm sensitive to the reality that some folks aren't called to preach on a street corner or get involved with a vigil for life or even run a prayer meeting. But are you willing to help the weakest among us? If there is trepidation within you, I say take heart and know that you're in the body of the risen King. There has never been another country in the world that fights for an ideal like that which was born on 1776. Use your hard-fought rights to scream, Jesus Christ, from the rooftops. Greater than 1 million patriots have done the heavy lifting by sacrificing themselves in the defense of the Bible-inspired Constitution that formed this nation, which has given all of us as believers the gift of freedom of religion. They've cleared the path for us to openly follow Jesus Christ and to build up his mighty kingdom within this great land. They made the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. And I urge you all that now is the time for us to pay it forward. We are here but for a short period of time, brothers and sisters, so make it count. In the days, the weeks, the months that lie ahead, I challenge each of you to seek Jesus Christ in a meaningful way and ask God for opportunities to lay down your life for another. This is your charge. Do you accept it? As we begin to wind down, I ask that as you go about your day, this Memorial Day, you take time to remember Sergeant First Class Paul R. Murphy, Lieutenant Michael P. Murphy, Sergeant First Class, Senior Airman Jason D. Cunningham, and Sergeant Rafael Peralta. And also remember the words of Sergeant Dennis O'Brien. Only two defining forces have ever offered to die for you: Jesus Christ and the American soldier. One died for your soul, The other died for your freedom. God bless these precious souls. God bless this congregation. May God continue to bless the United States of America.